So welcome to the fifth live stream, Friday Q&A. So today I've got Miranda Heipel from Indebted, and we'll be talking about vulnerability. So it might work just to kind of introduce just a little bit of a background of like what your role is in Indebted and your history, like how you got into head of talent and being in that game.
Definitely. So I started in my career about 6 years ago, working specifically in tech recruitment. Did some ad hoc through people leads, worked into a VR content studio where I set up the full talent cycle, into Airtasker here in Australia, working in the people space, and then now with Indebted. Been there about 2 months, and they're a small enough startup, they need to lay all the foundations. So my role there is to figure out everything they need from the people space, and get that set up and scale them.
So that's great. So like we're talking about vulnerability today, and this is a topic that I've followed probably for the last 5 to 6 months in the company. I mean, before obviously I've been kind of taking that approach of vulnerability, but just never put a name to it. But what really stood out was Brene Brown's content for me, the book Dare to Lead. And she talks a lot about courage and having difficult conversations in the workplace, and as a leader, the importance of vulnerability and not having your armor up. It's like that's really played the role for what I do as a leader now. It feels like we're more of a team than ever in actually implementing some of her kind of techniques, and it's like realizing that there are people in your company and you don't just have your armor up all the time, and it's like you actually let yourself go a bit. And when you kind of lead with courage, what I've found is when I lead with courage, then the team also become courageous, and then we can have really open and honest discussions. So what have you seen in terms of vulnerability in the workplace in history, or what's really the trend right now?
So history is definitely the complete opposite. I think a lot of us probably grew up, and myself specifically in North America. It's you're the person who knows everything. Your credibility is at risk if you don't. And especially as a leader, manager, entrepreneur, people look to you to have all the answers, and that's what it's been. And then I think over time, even myself struggling with vulnerability and that concept, how does it work? Where are the lines? The trend now is definitely going the opposite, and being completely open, and as long as that's facilitated in the right way, it can bring amazing things out, but also making sure people are comfortable with that along the way, and set up for those conversations which would stem, as you've been doing, from the top down.
What do you think is leading that trend? Like, why are we I guess moving away from that culture where it's like we're just leaders, we know everything, we should know everything, and we have our kind of shields up as we come to work, and it's like what's creating that culture that I say softening in a way. It's like leaders are kind of softening into the team and allowing themselves to be more vulnerable and have that kind of approach. What do you think is creating that trend?
It's probably a combination of a multitude of things. You could sum it up in one word: millennials.
Yeah. Okay.
But the accessibility of social media, opportunity to hear each other from around the world and share what's been best practices. The whole workplace is shifting as well, being in a digital space now. If you go back to our parents, a lot of them probably worked in factories, and you had, or in an office, and it was a 9 to 5, you went and you did it, it was a job. And now with the idea of careers and actually being a part of a company and that impact, there's all these different ways that we can go about it, and people are just, from a psychological perspective, more open as well, and talking about it. But it's probably trendsetters who are having these conversations, and then people will latch on, talk about it, share it on social media, and then it becomes a thing.
Yeah. And I think that's the funny thing is though that, and this is something Brene Brown takes an approach on saying, is that the number one myth about vulnerability is that it's a weakness, like it's being seen as a weakness. And I can see even just I've run this company, EasyCompanies, for 6 years, so I haven't had that much workplace experience being an employee, but I can say at the time I did have it, it seemed like everyone at work just has these kind of guards up all the time, and there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes that's never spoken about. It's like people come to work with these things that they feel like there's not enough space for them to express the challenges that they're facing or the problems that they're encountering.
Yeah, definitely.
So that they just go quiet, and then that kind of eventually it seems it stems to unhappiness or big arguments start happening. And you're like, where's all this coming from? But it's because there wasn't. It's that kind of environment where it's like, just come to work, do your job, go home. But the minute a company starts asking for like what is actually going on, how is everyone feeling, suddenly you hear all this feedback, and people feel heard.
Yeah, that's where I find vulnerability and transparency can actually be interchanged in different ways. Vulnerability can obviously extend far beyond that, but if you create an environment that's based off of transparency, vulnerability inevitably becomes a piece of that.
You said transparency being honesty, or honesty as a leader, like letting people know what's actually going on?
I would say vulnerability is the honesty portion, whereas transparency is the openness.
The openness,
so having it out there, which is not commonplace from historical and especially in corporate environments. Vulnerability is the next step though, because if you're transparent and you put everything out there, that's great. But vulnerability is talking about it and how do you feel about it, and is this working for you?
And it's not full disclosure, or it's not disclosure for the sake of disclosure, right? Like I'm just going to tell everyone everything because that's vulnerability. Because then you're just like, being vulnerable for the sake of being vulnerable is not vulnerability, if that makes sense. It's like, it's like, I'm going to just be vulnerable, I'm going to tell you what's going on and everyone else, these are all the things that I'm encountering. That's not vulnerability, that's just, it's like you still have your shield on, but you're just expressing everything. So
it's more of that almost ties into a concept or correlates with the loudest voice is heard, where you're stating it just to be heard. So I'd say it's one of the ways that you could incorrectly set up vulnerability in an environment is by just saying it for the sake of it, because then there's no actual reason behind it. If you're doing it because you want to express something and be heard, then that's okay. But if you're just throwing it out there consistently, then where is the actual genuinity behind it?
What's the intent? Intent, right?
Because when you're being vulnerable, not only is it creating a space for people to be comfortable, and that is for them, but as a leader, when you're being vulnerable, it's not actually for you, it's for your people. And so if you're just throwing it out there,
that's exactly right.
That comes from a selfish place then.
Then it still stems back to being selfish, like I'm just sharing this to make myself feel better. That's not vulnerability, because vulnerability is almost creating enough space that someone else, that you can have those difficult conversations, and it's uncomfortable. I mean, it doesn't have to be uncomfortable all the time, but it can be, right? And it seems that in the past, the bigger companies that are running in a non-vulnerable way, it's like you're just removing the discomfort from everything that's going on. Even in potentially difficult conversations that you have to have with the team, it's like you make it not difficult. That's the opposite of vulnerability. It's like everything's very stubborn and very, let's just all think intelligently about this, intelligently or more in the mind, but there's no kind of true connection that's happening. It's all, from a stubborn place, should I say. So that's been, that something that we do at EasyCompanies is, what we brought in probably the last 4 months, is that after every meeting we rate them, and we have a document, and everyone just kind of count 1 or 3, 2, 1, and then we all put our ratings so that there's no bias, because otherwise, if rating out of 5, then you put a 2 and everyone else put a 5, and you're going to feel like, in that moment I'll just scale it up. But once it's there, and then we open up the forum. Okay, what's still lingering on? What went wrong with this meeting? Because it might not be that they're rating the meeting wrong. It's just that they still haven't voiced things, right? So I think that's a good segue into feedback, and asking for feedback is another form of vulnerability. And I think a lot of us don't. Potentially, it's not everyone, but potentially I have in the past not wanted to ask for feedback because I don't want to hear the result, because it's something that I've done wrong. But being a courageous leader means asking, like, what am I doing wrong? And actually realizing that I don't have all the answers. So what's your experience been in terms of feedback in the workplace? And
well, I've definitely seen it both ways, but it is incredibly important. And to make it 360 as well. So of course, traditionally, it's consistently the manager providing feedback to the employee, but to your point, it's just as, if not more important, depending on where you're at with your business, to get it going the other direction. And that can be difficult, it's uncomfortable. As long as you frame it in a way where it's constructive feedback or constructive criticism, and that there are tangible points that you can work from. And a key thing that I've learned along the way is to separate data from feelings. And they're both great. They're actually both very beneficial.
But not mix them up.
But don't mix them up. So in the terminology that I use and where I coach people to have difficult conversations is you put the points out. Here's the data. Here's the examples that did occur. This is how it made me feel. Or this is how I'm feeling now because of it. And then what you're doing is you're alleviating the blame game, which will occur if it's, oh, well, you're acting in a way that is a bad person. No, I'm feeling that based off your actions, it makes me feel like less of a person, or whatever the situation might be.
What's an example where that gets mixed up, or how, like, delivering data and feelings at the same time, how does that get mixed up?
So say you're working on a project, and there's two people that are contributing to it, and one person is stepping on the other's toes. The data is that the person is taking on, say, 75% instead of 50. The feelings is that this person feels like they're not worthy, or that the other person might feel that they're better than them. That may not be the case. This other person who's doing 75% may just be like, oh, I see it and I'm fixing it. Or they may genuinely think, I'm better at doing this portion than you are, but because you haven't had that conversation to be open about it, it's being received in different ways.
And that kind of stems into the issue of, like, when you say separated, it's interesting because what comes up for me there is, like, when you're giving feedback, sometimes there's other things below the surface that are getting delivered in a message that isn't what's actually happening. So it's like, I'm telling you, you know, it frustrates me when, or maybe not even frustrates, I don't like it when you do this, but what's actually happening underneath is I feel threatened by you or something. And I'm not sharing that, I'm just sharing this top surface stuff that still doesn't get the message across, which I think is when a space is created where people can actually express their feelings and feel safe to without getting judgment. Then you actually get the true message of what's going on. You know, I feel like my job's threatened, or, you know, 3 weeks ago you stepped on my toes. I never brought it up because I didn't feel like I could, and that's why for the last 3 weeks we've been having issues. It's not all the issues that I made it seem like, it's actually underneath the surface, you know.
Definitely.
So how do we encourage courageous conversations in the workplace?
Very difficultly. But I'd say it's a matter of, like, leading by example, of course, putting yourself out there so that people can see that behavior is okay. But just talking about it openly as well amongst the entire team. Don't segregate them into specific conversations. Have that channel as a team. But then what's also really important is that you ensure people are comfortable, not only with providing it and being open and vulnerable, but also with receiving it. Which is what nobody actually thinks about.
I think it's easier to give feedback than it is to receive it. That's been my experience, at least. It's easier to kind of point, and that's not to deter too much, but to point the finger at someone than it is to be pointed at you. It's
feedback and the vulnerability. People might not be that comfortable by nature to actually receive someone's vulnerability and openness, and that probably goes in a bit more when it's a deeper level. But at the same time, you have to ensure that people are okay with that as well. And if they're not, understand why. What are those drivers, and what can we do to alleviate that so that you are comfortable? And that's
they feel uncomfortable when someone is being vulnerable around them.
They could, I mean, think about it. If I were to break down right now and start crying in front of you, would you be comfortable with it?
I could probably hold the space, maybe. I don't know.
Would another person necessarily be okay with it?
I don't know.
You don't know.
I think in a potential bigger business meeting, I think in traditionally what I would see is that it would be quickly like, oh, this is making me feel uncomfortable.
And then the person who's trying to be vulnerable is even more uncomfortable and puts up more of a wall. and then you're actually taking steps backwards.
Yeah, you're right. So it's about, I guess, as a leader, because obviously a lot of the audience that are watching this are running their own businesses. So as a leader, it's like, how do we encourage vulnerability in the workplace and courageous conversations? And I think what I really see there is that the leader has to lead by example, right?
Yeah.
Starting off with being courageous, not waiting for the team to do that. You kind of have to lead and show the way that you're able to be vulnerable. I think once you take the first step, then the rest of the team potentially can.
Yeah, I would say you do it leading by example. Have the open forum conversation with the team, because even though you may be leading and taking those actions, everybody receives them differently and interprets it different. So they may not understand the actual drivers and reason behind it. So then have the open forum conversation with the team as to, this is how I want to run. And you do that from like first conversation of hiring as well. Like, this is the environment, this is how we operate. So talk about it amongst the team, and here's how we like to run things. Always feel free to be open. And then one-on-one with individuals, because every person has to be managed differently. That's been something that's been in the workplace for eons. But the concept of how that's done now is changing. And so if you want to introduce vulnerability, that's a different topic that happens in the one-on-one, and that's where you understand, are people comfortable with it? Are you comfortable with receiving it? If not, how do we set that up? And then you have to ensure that the environment is safe for everyone.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's making sure people aren't then getting too uncomfortable with vulnerability, right? But the one-on-ones are interesting because they're obviously the traditional one-on-one, you know, with line manager or whoever is managing you and the team member. Something that we've incorporated at EasyCompanies is these kind of rumbles or breakouts, where even if the traditional one-on-one isn't set there, we can sit down and have, in a sense, a one-on-one with anyone in the team. To just talk through the issues that are coming up, because it could be someone that you're working with in the team. You might not be having a one-on-one with every week, but you need to have that free-flowing, Brene Brown calls it like rumble. Like, let's have a rumble. Let's get, in her technology, it's in the boxing ring, but it's not, you know, it's not in that sense, but it's like, let's work this out. Let's talk through what's actually happening, so it's not staggering productivity. Because I think what I see the biggest impacts that has on productivity in our workplace is people not feeling valued and people not feeling happy to kind of be there. And that's not because they're not happy with the company, they're unhappy with things that are going on. Which is going to come up when you're working with other people.
Definitely. And I mean, so it goes obviously from leader to team member, and then as you're saying, amongst team members, and as you grow, it'll go amongst the leadership level, it'll go amongst the peer level, it'll go top and down, different departments, it goes everywhere. So definitely setting people up for that, so you can use the concept of a rumble. The fierce training I did before with Susan
fierce
Scott,
training,
she does a fierce conversation, and those need to occur as well. And as you scale and grow and get bigger, the thing you want to encourage people to do is talk to each other. That starts from day one, but especially when you get larger, encourage them to do that and coach them through those conversations and how to have them. Kind of the rumble that you can do. Because you want to set up an environment where people can go to each other. And then if things don't work out, that's okay. Then it can get stemmed up and brought to the next level. But if problems are constantly coming to the leadership team...
They never disappear, do they, for some reason?
No, they never do.
I don't know, it seems like they will. And I've had moments where it's like, that's it, I'm just going to go this alone. You know, it's like, it can sometimes feel like that's the mentality you can get stuck in, is it's like, fine, I'll just do everything myself, because then I don't have to deal with the problems that I'm having with other people, which then creates its own problem in the end.
Definitely. The leader can't be the person with all the answers. They can't solve all the problems. They have to work with
So as a leader, it seems more often than not, it is about addressing problems quicker and stepping into uncomfortable conversations quicker and just getting it out and then moving on. It seems the longer you leave it, the more things that are going to pop up and the more issues you're going to face. So yeah, one-on-ones, I think, are a great way in terms of structure and routine, but the rumble conversations beyond that makes sense. What's like something we brought in was every morning in our daily stand-ups, which are just a kind of 10-minute quick conversation about what we're doing, we'll also bring in an emotion board, as we call it, or something like that, and we'll just kind of rate how we're feeling in that given day. I noticed that you do that in some of the teams in Indebted. What are the kind of what's your kind of vision of doing that, or what have you seen that work out well in the past? Because for us, I think it's more about just showing that, like, you know, we all kind of go through different moods throughout the week, and, you know, I'm tired because of this or that, but it just shows that our emotions can be felt. It's not like we're expected to just be happy every day.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, that's the whole piece of vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
Things that change in your life, you have to create a space where,
yeah.
you know, there could be a really big personal problem happening at home. Somebody could have lost somebody that they care for. And if you don't create a space where people can be open and just say, like, I'm not doing okay today and I just need my space, then you're not setting them up for success. From the what did you call it? The feeling meter?
I call it the emotion board.
Emotion board.
I mean, emoji came to head. We did think of getting all the emojis in a pile, and, like, you can put whatever if you want to put on.
That's good fun.
Feeling meter if you want.
Feeling meter. I just made that up for some reason.
The feelings board. Yeah.
Emotions board. That works.
Yeah. Emotions. It is emotions, right?
Yeah. In smaller teams or smaller size, that completely works.
Yeah.
There are definitely softwares out there that can be incorporated. So we use Lattice internally. We're rolling out OKRs and one-on-ones through it. But a portion of that is actually how you're feeling. So on a weekly basis, you'll get your every employee's not required, but you ask every employee to give a rating from 1 to 5 about how they're feeling, essentially. And then they put that in, and they can put notes in it as well. And so you then get updates. So the manager gets a notification when that's done, and they understand how their employee's feeling. And then based off that, if for some reason that's dropped really low, it's like, whoa, why is that dropped? And they might give you some indications there, and then you can have a conversation about it. Obviously, you hope things are happening on a regular basis as well, with the one-on-ones.
Yeah, I think the offline, like, they're both, the software is good for just making sure that the routine and the kind of day-to-day, like, that's being captured day-to-day, and it doesn't go lost in the wash. The hard part with technology is it removes the vulnerability again. It can. So it's like, I think you need both.
Yeah. It's like the setup.
I just know that when you're behind Slack or something, it's harder to kind of express how you're feeling, or if there are feelings there, it's harder, or even just express yourself fully because you're behind a computer again, and all the body language gets removed.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Just the text. So it's, I think there's a fit for both, and I mean, I've installed the software that you're using yesterday, which looks good in terms of keeping the rhythm of the company happening.
Yeah. Nothing beats a face-to-face.
Yeah.
For sure.
But you still, and that's actually a challenge with remote. I've had with remote meetings is sometimes, even if you're on camera, you're still not physically present in the room, and that can change it. Like, there's so much that happens behind the surface that the camera just can't communicate.
It's amazing how much energy actually
you forget
does impact.
Like, being physically present with someone is very different to seeing them on a camera, hearing them on a camera, but all the other senses are lost. It's like, so that's something with remote teams I think can be a challenge, but I mean, it comes with its own pros and cons. So yeah, just before we wrap up, is there anything you think we haven't covered or you'd like to add in with vulnerability?
I guess when it comes to it, if you want to implement it in an environment and with your team, just being very conscious of why you're doing it, and acknowledging that. So always check in with yourself as to why am I doing this, and understand your drivers, because it can come from a selfish place.
When you say why am I doing this, you mean why am I bringing vulnerability in, or why am I okay?
And the method that you're going to do it, why am I choosing to do it that way? And what is the impact that I'm looking for? So kind of reverse engineer it, so that you can check in every step of the way and ensure that you're accomplishing what you're actually trying to do. Because again, it's that aspect of, you just throw it out there for the sake of throwing it out there, you're probably not going to accomplish what you want.
Yeah, that's true.
And then making sure that your team's always comfortable, and then just constantly talking about it. And it will seem like over communication, and it'll probably seem frustrating, but then you get in that rhythm, and then you can continue to do that. And as your team scales, it will change as well. And I guess the only additional thing I'd say, and one thing I quote quite often, is taking comfort in the discomfort. Yeah,
I think that's it. And I mean, that stems to that same thing, that vulnerability for the sake of vulnerability is not vulnerability, because it's like, if you're just doing it because it seems like the next best thing you can do for your business because it's fun or something. It's not going to be fun.
It's definitely not fun.
Vulnerability is showing up and having the different conversations, even if they're so uncomfortable. And that's it. I think, yeah, it's not something that's necessarily fun, but once you see it working, you're actually going to have much more fun at work because all of that baggage that we're all carrying under the surface gets let out, and it's like, you know, then people want to be heard.
Yeah,
That's it.
well, most of the time, right? You have to make sure that people
It's
are
not-
educated and
yeah.
enabled in the way that it makes them feel comfortable.
Yeah,
People might not be able, or sorry, might not know how to be able to express themselves.
yeah,
In which case, as the leader, it becomes your responsibility
to help guide
them.
them there. Yeah, but they definitely want to be heard. Like not not
You're
acknowledging.
like, no, everyone does.
Yeah, well, I want to be heard. No, I think that's it. Are there any questions on the live stream?
At this stage, no.
Any other that you had submitted or?
No.
Okay, cool. Well, that wraps up this episode of the weekly Q&A. If you haven't liked us on Facebook, definitely go check out EasyCompanies and like them. And follow Miranda on LinkedIn if you haven't already as well. LinkedIn or Facebook? LinkedIn. Yeah, and I think Indebted's over there on LinkedIn as well if you want to keep track of them. They seem to be going amazing places right now, so definitely follow the journey.
Thank you.
Tune in to our email list where we announce the weekly Q&A. And until next time, thank you for having you.
Thank you.
And that's it. That's a wrap.